All right. Happy Thursday, everybody. My name's Hajar. I'll be your curator, your host for the day. We're doing this great video series here at Whereoware. If you don't know anything about Whereoware, definitely hop on LinkedIn. Check us out. We're a digital experience agency. We focus on all things in marketing, including development strategy, data analytics, all those amazing things. And for today's first edition, I have two very special guests. Kristen Scott, who's our senior director of data and analytics, and Jeff Aaron, who's our digital sales exec. Happy Thursday, team. How are you doing today?
Happy
Doing good.
Thursday.
Awesome, awesome. So I'd like to ask you all, how did you actually get into marketing as an industry? Marketing agency world, however you want to define it.
Kristen, you want to go first?
Sure. Yeah, I'll go first. It's actually kind of a fun story. So, I didn't really see myself going into marketing as I was going through college and thinking about what my plans were after college. I actually have a degree in anthropology, which is kind of
Oh,
funny.
nice.
I oftentimes like to relate that degree to data, kind of say that anthropology is really the inspection of how humans build their culture. And so I kind of think, marketing is really part of the culture of us as human beings. And so we're kind of inspecting different things through data to see how we're building different solutions or solving different problems. But anyway, so how I got into, marketing really is I was looking for an internship in college, and what was presented to me was a SEO internship. So I actually started out doing SEO, which really got me into looking at Google Analytics and also other enterprise data systems. And that really started my adventure into agency life and working within marketing. And I just kind of caught the bug after that and just pursued really working more in data after I started kind of with a fixture in SEO. I kind of broadened what I was interested in and went a little bit more on the track of data and analytics.
I love that. And I like how you tied in anthropology to marketing. That because you marketed in doing that, right? You really
Mhm.
told a story and showed those connections. So that's pretty awesome. Jeff, what about you?
Yeah, slightly different track for me. I knew pretty much from a young age I was going to go the sales route. So
Okay.
that was the track that I pursued from the beginning. So through college, I was on a communications and marketing track with a minor in business administration. And upon graduation, I went into inside sales, which I knew I was going to go that route. Started in software sales, and then somewhere along the way, an opportunity had presented itself to get into digital, which at the time was this new wave thing. It was,
Yep.
people didn't quite know what it was. It was like the early days of Facebook, and I was like, oh yeah, you can like do Facebook marketing. And so I joined an agency somewhere along the way, probably around 20-ish years ago, and had always remained sales oriented. So I was always doing business development, even within an agency. Like that's my role here today at Whereoware still. But I think what why I stayed within the marketing world is I really enjoyed the aspect of problem solving, and there was such a rapid pace of innovation, not only in terms of technology, but just new creative tools and strategic thinking. And now we live in this world of data, and I'm sort of enthralled by all the different ingredients that go into marketing nowadays.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And knowing your role is business development, can you kind of talk about some of the trends you're seeing as far as what problems clients are looking to get solved today?
Ooh, yeah, that's a loaded question, Hajar.
Yeah, I know, right?
Um, I mean, there's a lot. I think so. I primarily interface with both prospective customers and active clients of ours. Usually, I tend to have conversations with either like digital experience or digital experience slash customer experience type roles and functions. To some degree, revenue operations. And then there's up and down the marketing organization from leadership all the way to day-to-day practitioners. I touch a little bit with the IT org, working with engineers, solution architects, those folks, but generally sort of my background and most of the conversations I'm having are geared around folks thinking about revenue operations, customer experience, and day-to-day marketing. And there's lots of different initiatives and topics that occupy their minds. But I'd say one big trend that sort of enters itself into almost every conversation I have is around data, what to do with it, how can we draw insights from it, how can we improve our reporting so that we can ultimately improve the outcomes, and outcomes generally being better customer experiences or more profitable revenue for the business.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And, knowing this world of marketing requires data to do a great job at identifying your customer base. You have to know what to do with the data. Gone are the days where you could plaster a billboard and imagine that's going to drive the traffic towards your product. The same way commercials used to have a massive impact, newspaper advertisements, magazine advertisements. Now we rely on data to find the customers to make sure we could solve that problem for them. So in thinking
And I
about,
think just to add to that, to find the right customers, I
the
think
right
that's what
customers,
data is helping
absolutely.
businesses do as well. I've gone through a few cycles and conversations with various clients over the years, and one of the first questions that our team usually asks our clients, either through a pre-engagement mode or early days of actual engagement and onboarding, we always ask, who is your ideal customer profile? Do you have a well-defined ICP? And sometimes clients think they have or think they know what their ICP is, only to once we start connecting systems and start to actually dig into the data, it's like, well, did you actually know that it's kind of like this is your ICP? So I think data can help you identify not just who you should target with what messaging, when is the right time, are there intent signals? Like there's a lot of stuff going on in the world of data around customer acquisition, but I think one of the biggest things that sometimes gets overlooked is using data to really identify who are your best customers and how can we find more of them that look like that.
And you know what, Jeff, you mentioned a lot of great things, and I did want to make it a point to define all acronyms we use on this platform, because when I came into marketing, so many acronyms got thrown at me, and I'm like, I don't know what this is. At the end of the day, the most important one is CYA. But ICP, can you give our viewers a quick breakdown of what that is?
Yeah, that's one of the easier ones in my mind. It's ideal customer profile. And that could be made up of firmographic data, behavioral data, simple demographics. It means, what does our ideal customer look like? And common metrics are, revenue size, geography that they operate within, employee count, industries they serve, that sort of thing. But really, you can get much more granular when you start to look at data.
Great way to break that down. And in thinking about your approach with clients, knowing that you're kind of identifying what opportunities there may lie, where it can jump in and be assistance in terms of helping building business, trying to hit those goals that they're looking for. Once data is presented as something that is a challenge at a company, Kristen, can you give us some detail as to how you take that first approach to understand what the situation is? And Jeff, chime in when you need to.
Yeah. Well, actually, Kristen, do you mind? Because you're the smart one.
No.
At least between the two of us.
About that, but
so
if I finish your what,
I just want to take the first stab to tee you up.
Okay,
I was actually, Hajar, I was chatting with a prospect the other day, and this is a common theme that I have with most conversations that I have with marketers. But this guy summed it up so perfectly. He said, "Jeff, we're drowning in data, but we're starving for insights." And he put a nice little bow on the problem, which I think embodies a lot of what today's marketers are dealing with, which is we have lots of data, we have lots of reporting, but we're having difficulty drawing insights from that and then taking action on it with the ultimate end goal of improving our performance. So I think Kristen is the one with more of the answers, but that is definitely a common theme that I'm hearing across the industry.
Yeah, Jeff and I are on prospect calls a lot, and as you mentioned, Jeff, it's a lot of our clients who've onboarded a variety of tools to help them solve problems that they're having. So to gain awareness within their ICP, to understand attribution, to report out on performance. It's just some examples of that. And so there might be a variety of platforms that are helping support those 3 initiatives that we just mentioned, and there are a ton more. And so, with each one of those platforms, you have to think there are a set of data points associated with each platform. And when we think about, what's available in that landscape, that's where you can go into data overload, and you might be looking at the wrong data. You might just be regurgitating data points, which is a really big issue as we see it. And what I know we try to do, Hajar, you specifically in the strategy seat alongside the analytics team, of really not just spewing data points, but understanding what the business goal is and what the targets are for the client. And that's what's most important, is you need to understand that first. You need to understand overarchingly, for this company to be successful, what are the key KPIs? And there are KPIs for every platform, but for the business at a macro level, there's going to be macro KPIs and micro KPIs. And so a macro KPI could be revenue for a company. It could be the amount of opportunities, the closed won ratio for a company. That's going to be a macro level that allows them to operate. Now, micro level could be more on working through the initiative. So if we're talking about driving awareness, that's going to help then look to engagement, talk to a conversion, and then to the sales initiative. They're going to be micro KPIs beneath that. So there's going to be impression count. There's going to be the lead to MQL ratio to SQL ratio. There's going to be the return on investment that we're seeing from the attribution of these different campaigns. So all of those are micro data points. But, to the point that we're discussing right now, people can become overwhelmed by data points. And we also have specialists in the field where they may feel very familiar with certain data points, but not as familiar with other ones. So the goal that I think that we have in solutioning for our clients is being able to tell the story that can bubble up the right conversations in those micro data points, and then say, this is how it's impacting your macro data points. And so, to what you guys both mentioned, it's really the storytelling, but the right storytelling, not just trying to make up a story that's going to help Whereoware, but the story that's really going to help our client's business based on their targets and their macro goals.
Yeah, that's great. I definitely want to take that opportunity to segue into reporting a little bit deeper. But before we do that, you brought up 2 acronyms. I did it to Jeff. Now I've got to ask you, MQL, SQL.
Yep.
Can you break that down for us?
Yeah, so marketing qualified lead and sales qualified lead. So, just kind of giving a little basis of that. When we work with clients who are putting a sales process together, a sale target and nurture strategy to have these, leads, people who are contacting them for a solution or a product, and they need to nurture them. So there's different ways that you can qualify these leads. And a lot of what we'll support clients with is helping identify that funnel. Yeah. So as they become known to you as a lead, how you can get them to MQL, which is marketing qualified lead, which means that they're a little bit more qualified than just a lead where you're just knowing them. Marketing qualified could be that they've done certain touch points on their site. They could have read a white paper. They could have had different touches on the site in terms of industry case studies that they read. Those are all just examples. So that could lead them to MQL. And then the next step from that would be SQL, so sales qualified lead. That's when the sales team could look at, is this a lead or an account that really matches what we're trying to hit as a company in terms of our ICP, as Jeff just mentioned. So if they become sales qualified, that can help nurture, to the further end of closing that opportunity or closing that sale for the business. So, kind of just bubbling it back, at the acronym level, these are discussions like we just had of saying, if if we had clients or team members of our clients that aren't really familiar with that funnel process in sales, they may not come to the right insights or the right recommendations. So it's really like you just mentioned, Hajar, and I love that you're having us go through the acronyms, because it should be accessible to everyone. It shouldn't just be
absolutely.
a marketing discussion. We should, it's really, how can we help people better understand to get to a better solution?
Exactly. I love that. And thinking about our approach with new clients and understanding where we could figure out how to help. I think about one of my favorite shows, Gordon Ramsay, Kitchen Nightmares, right? So I look at the data as like the kitchen, and you walk into the kitchen, and you're like, what is this? What are we doing? How are you putting your data in the walk-in? And if you watch Kitchen Nightmares, you know how intense it could get. I'm not going to fill this video series with any expletives, right? But sometimes when you look at a client's data set, you may say, wow, how'd you get into this situation? So when we talk about reporting, we know there's levels, right? We know that reporting for a channel manager is going to be very different for an executive. What is the process for identifying for a client what types of reports they need? Because we know some clients just want reports for the sake of having it to understand how they're performing on all levels. Some clients just want specific KPIs and secondary KPIs they can focus on to say, okay, this is affecting my business health. How do we fix it? So, what's part of the process? And you both can answer. Like, how would you approach identifying the best type of report for a client?
Yeah, and Jeff, I'll have you jump in first, because I'm sure there's a lot that you're hearing from the sales process.
Yeah, I'll have a little bit to add, but I think Kristen, you might be better suited to field this one. But from my view, I think it largely depends on the maturity and complexity and size of the marketing organization. If you're running lean and you just have a small crew, then the level of reporting that might be needed there could be different. But Hajar, you definitely nailed it. There's for sure a difference between the level of reporting that an executive or business leader is going to want to see, rather than a marketing specialist or channel specific marketer might need. And also sort of hearkening back to what we were talking about before, all these acronyms and different data points and micro level KPIs versus macro level KPIs. Someone that's running paid media for a business is going to definitely be looking at different KPIs than someone in the C-suite.
Yep.
So ensuring that you have the right reporting and dashboards to speak to those different audiences is going to help the business run more efficiently and more effectively.
Yeah, I agree with that. And, you just made me think of something, both Jeff and Hajar, as you were going through that, of really alignment across an organization. So, as you were mentioning, Jeff, and as you were mentioning, Hajar, that there are going to be levels of a report, and it might be, if they have a rather flat organization or a smaller organization, there might be less levels of reporting, but there at least needs to be alignment on, not to, kind of go overextending on the macro business goal, but alignment on what the macro business goal should be. And so, to the example that we just gave of, maybe a paid search specialist is going to be very focused on their KPIs to make sure that their paid search strategies are working to the best of their abilities, but they need to know the why behind that. And we always say that, and it's kind of, we giggle as we say it, because it's kind of like a no duh thing, but there always has to be a why behind a strategy. And I think it's knowing that it's not just we get this discussion all the time, and I think it's a really good discussion where we have clients who say, well, what's the impression count, or how many conversions do I have? And let's say that's just for paid search, and we could give the number of impression count and conversions. But really, that's not the story. That's just, those are indicators to help us understand if we're being effective. But if we're being effective, what we should see that is really that bubble into the macro. So if we're being effective and we're driving impressions, and we're driving a lot of impressions, we should see also the quality of, if we're putting out quality content, let's say with display ads through paid search, we should see engagement be related to that. So, kind of jumping back into what this discussion is all about, there are going to be a variety of reports, and I think it's really aligning the business goal and what the North Star is, if we will, for a organization. And then really layering beneath that, what are we doing to try to hit that North Star? What are our objectives? And then making sure that you have reports to speak to your performance in those objectives. So we gave some good examples about channel reporting, but it also has to be based on the objective of those channel reports. So we gave an example of a paid media, let's say strategist. And so with that paid media strategist, they need to know what their objective is in that organization. Is it to drive awareness, or is it to drive consideration and conversion? Because depending on what their target is of their objective, they're going to look at different KPIs for their strategies and their content.
And also objectives can change and shift throughout the year. Q1 objectives might look vastly different than Q4 objectives.
And that's where organizational communication is imperative. And look, we're all people at the end of the day, and organizations are going to operate how they operate. And some run a very tight ship. Some could be a little more loose. So I like what you said, Kristen, about alignment and having a North Star, and especially knowing that, to your point, Jeff, things can change. I've seen goals set for a year, and then by the end of Q1, it's like, nope, let's actually switch to something that's a little more attainable. So I'm thinking about a North Star and then the KPIs and the goals that ladder up to that. I think it's monumentally important for clients to have that defined. And what you find is sometimes organizations don't have that manifesto for a given year. So I look at, those things as almost rallying cries, right? If you know that for 2024, our objective is to, I'm just making this up, create dynamic experiences for customers and drive record-setting revenue, right? Maybe that's not the best North Star, but it's something to give this ship some direction, right? And then from there, you identify, okay, well, what are the KPIs that matter for that North Star? Obviously, revenue is always going to be number one, and we know execs are always looking at that. Channel managers are going to look at their revenue for their channels, etc. But what are the KPIs that roll up into that revenue? And how can we make changes based on what the data is telling us to then hit the goals necessary to focus on our North Star? So thinking about that, uh, have you all worked with many clients who definitively tell you, hey, this is our North Star for the year? And if they don't have that, are they able to tell you, this is our revenue goal, this is our impression goals? Is that something we're seeing across the board, or is it that some clients have it together and some maybe could do a little more work in terms of setting the tone for that year?
I can jump in here first on this one, because I feel like in the clients that I've worked with, over the time that I've worked in data and analytics, they have an idea. They may have a fuzzy target of what they need to hit, and that will usually be the macro goal. So it could be, we want to hit 25 million in revenue for the year. We want to increase our opportunities that are converted by 5%. So they have those kind of, overarching, this is what the business wants us to achieve. But I think Whereoware really supports, and where I've seen, agencies in general really support those macro goals, is acknowledging all the pieces beneath that need to be set, and the strategies and the optimization and the conversations that need to be had to really get to that. And I think that's where it's great when you're working with an agency, in my opinion, because you have so many subject matter experts. Just looking at this group right here, and where we've worked and what we've specialized in, you have people with deep knowledge in the platforms and the strategies to connect what a business goal is and how you get to that point.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just sort of riff on what Kristen just said there. I think that is one of the biggest values that we bring as an agency partner to our clients, is connecting your business goals to all the inner workings underneath that, the various systems, the various data sources, how your team is dispersed, what they're working on, what everyone is focused on. We're sort of the connective tissue in many ways. playing problem solver and connector, helping a business sort of maintain that focus for that North Star macro level KPI.
Yeah, totally agreed. And thinking about goal setting on a deeper level, it's always good from a organizational psychology standpoint for leadership to focus on goals that are attainable. But you definitely have to balance what's attainable with business growth, right? But if you have a strong understanding of the market, the lay of the land in terms of economics, and we know challenges are pervasive in the larger marketplace. Like there's always going to be something going on globally or domestically that's going to affect how you do business. But what I found is that if you set a goal that is attainable, it almost creates a lighter energy within an organization where people feel like they can hit that goal to ladder up to that North Star, because nothing's worse than working with a lofty goal that doesn't have a strong foundation. So then you get into your weekly meetings or your bi-weeklies with execs, and you're reporting how far you're away from your weekly goal, your monthly goal. So it kind of creates an energy where you don't feel successful. So I feel like where there's a business growth component of goal setting, there's also organizational, I would say psychology or setting the tone for your business to kind of balance those things out as much as you can. And that all gets down to who's running the business and how it's been run in the past, etc. But I just thought that was an interesting take that I wanted to share on North Stars. And because we're talking about reporting, data, goals, I want to talk about attribution, because in reporting, you want to be able to attribute success within a given campaign or a multitude of campaigns, whatever it is that's occurring. You want to be able to say, hey, email drove 60 million, and we know exactly how we got there, and that number is correct, and we could pivot based on that number. What have you all seen with regards to clients and how they either have a strong attribution model, or where you see opportunities to help them shore that up so that they can know that they can rely on the reports that are built for them?
I guess I could jump in. Kristen, you'll probably be able to answer this more nuanced than me. But I've seen, generally speaking, when I've been involved in helping clients determine an attribution model for their business that makes sense, it generally falls into one of three categories. There's either a first touch attribution, there's a last touch attribution, or a multi-touch attribution model. Kristen, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we're pretty much advocates of multi-touch. We know that there's a lot of micro interactions that contribute into ultimately converting a prospect into a customer, and then that customer into long-term profitable revenue. So I've seen different theories on that. Kristen, you and I were just talking with a prospect the other day, and he was saying, I can't convince my leadership to move to a multi-touch model. They're just convinced that it's the last activity gets all full attribution, and as marketers, we're feeling shortchanged because we know that a paid media campaign that I ran ultimately brought them into our universe, but I'm getting no credit for it. So
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of different theories and schools of thought on that, but generally speaking, given our experience, I'll speak for my own experience. There's a lot that goes into, especially companies that have longer sales cycles. There's a lot that goes into nurturing and ultimately converting that customer. And we've seen that buying committees have grown in size. So it's not just a single contact that you have to track and attribute revenue towards or a conversion goal against. It's the account holistically, which now has more contacts and members that are part of a buying committee. So the attribution models have grown more complex over recent years, but there's a few different ways that you can skin a cat, as they say.
Yeah,
Definitely.
I completely agree. And I think those are great examples. We did have that discussion with that one prospect, and we had a great discussion with that prospect and kind of, where his leadership was and some of the discussions on why they want to use a last touch model instead of a multi-touch model. And so, just my thoughts on it, aligned to what Jeff just mentioned. it really, you need to understand the business, because what you would want to have a discussion from an attribution modeling aspect and looking at your return on investment and what you've done in terms of being able to look at, how should you optimize different campaigns, different medias that you have in flight. So, if we're talking about e-commerce, there's going to be a discussion that we want to have compared to if we're talking about a manufacturing kind of conversion and looking at that funnel. So, when we talk about attribution, you have to think of it in a couple ways. So, one, how are you setting yourself up for success in understanding attribution of the media, the content that you have in market? And so what I mean by that is from a technical landscape, what are you set up with? So, there's tools that can help with attribution like Visible, but there's also methods that can help you with attribution. So you want to make sure that in areas when you're looking at inbound campaigns, links that you're getting inbound activity to, that you're tagging those appropriately, that you have a methodology that you're using that helps you understand, the different platforms, the different campaigns, the content, and the audiences all aligned to those inbound techniques. Now, of course, there's more than just inbound going on. So you also need a way to be able to track that in terms of, let's say you're a manufacturing organization and you're going to trade shows, and you need to have some way of capturing those conversations, understanding the content that's part of those conversations. So oftentimes, I know we're all kind of used to this potentially at this time, is you're at a trade show and you see everybody with iPads and they're getting your information in the iPad, and that's promoting a system of understanding the source of where that activity, that lead as an example, is coming from, is this trade show, and how it's going into the CRM would be coded with that, because we would have an attribution system of understanding from an inbound method of basically, this is a trade show lead. I can tell this based on the content of the iPad that's potentially going into a form that's going into the CRM that would have coding alongside that. So not to get super granular here, but it's understanding the technology and some of the pieces here that you have to set up to be able to look at how you're attributing these different activities. And you really need to bucket those activities. So, we've worked with clients where we're looking at, different paid owned activities. You're looking at offline activities versus online activities, and how you look at being able to track those. And to the multi-touch environment, as we are speaking, it's not really a linear approach anymore, even with e-commerce, where somebody sees one ad, they convert. That might be a fraction of the population, but oftentimes, especially with larger sales cycles, there is going to be a variety of touch points online and offline that happen, that all need to have a system in place to see what are those touch points. So did they see a display ad, went to the site, read a white paper, we had sales call them, they came back to the site, all examples of touch points that you want to make sure that you are tracking, so you can see how you can optimize the funnel. And that's really the end goal. We can, and I see this, and I try to have this discussion a lot with my team, we get really passionate about all of the opportunities of how technically you can track this, but what's the goal at the end of the day? We need to get more sales faster, and basically increase our revenue, increase our customer count. And so how do we do that? We need to understand what's working in terms of the touch point. Do we have pieces of content out there that are not working as hard as maybe certain salespeople or certain ads in market? So knowing what works well helps us get to that end goal of getting that growth that we're trying to look for.
Well, that's excellent wealth of information. And look, at Whereoware, you can get some of this energy if tap in with us. Thinking about data, right? I think about one of my favorite songs, More Money, More Problems. So it's like more data, more problems. 30 years ago, Clorox could say everybody that walked into this store had a coupon, and we could track that coupon had success. To your point, now you have to attribute for all these touch points across this digital landscape, because who knows, somebody could have Somebody could have saw a commercial. How do you track that, you know? So it gets really challenging and tricky based on what kind of business you're running and based on what your current data practices are. And I think that ladders up to this idea of data governance, which I would define as the set of rules, regulations, processes in which you manage data that's coming in. And if you think about organizations that might have churn as far as their talent, when one person goes out the door, so does a wealth of knowledge and maybe their deep knowledge about that data. So keep your data people happy is a piece of advice I want to give all businesses out there. But as we get closer to kind of wrapping this conversation up, I wanted to ask you both if there was one thing you wanted to recommend to a client to rectify their data issues, what would that thing be? And I know that's a very broad question, right? Because
Yeah,
circumstances could be
there's
different.
I wish that they were like my top five, but I do think I can get
Yeah.
it to one. Because
Give me two or three if you want to. Two or three is cool.
okay, I do
Yeah.
think I can get it to one, but I'll name some others potentially. But so, the number one thing that I think has been really helpful with our clients is when we talk about understanding and mapping their MarTech stack. So that may seem, oh, that seems kind of basic, but I think it actually really does help because when you put together a framework of how all your MarTech works together, so you're outlining all of your inbound platforms, all of your, how you're operating in terms of your platform. So that could be your ERP system, your CRM, your CMS, all of these different tools and technologies. If you can map that out and have that dispersed across your organization so they know we're using this tool for that, this tool for that, it helps people know what they can go to for certain information and help them find solutions. So, we've had a couple discussions with our customers where they're not intimately aware of their MarTech stack or the why behind their MarTech stack. And that's where they run into a lot of bad data or data solutioning. So, that would be my number one takeaway right now.
Awesome.
Yeah, I guess I would say kind of what Kristen was saying. I think having a central single source of truth for your customer data that you can tap into and action across different tools, kind of what Kristen was saying, but having a central repository, because I've seen instances where businesses do have kind of a wealth of knowledge about a customer, but they're not actioning it effectively. They're
Yeah.
still sending generic emails or whatever the case may be. And it's like, if only you could figure out your MarTech and data repository situation, you can actually action it, if not in complete real time, closer to real time, right? Especially when you're talking about a business that might have brick and mortar locations, you're collecting data about store visits, about coupons cashed, about POS
Yep.
system data, right? So if you can incorporate that and then send more relevant, more personalized communications across various channels, I think you'll improve the customer experience overall. And even though it's from a marketing or creative standpoint, at least in my experience, a lot of the creatives and marketers that I interact with, they don't often think about like the underpinnings of technology and data, but it really has to all work together so that you can send more relevant, more personalized communications to the right people at the right time. And that takes data and connected technology.
Absolutely. And I think my answer is going to be a blend of what both of you said, but in simple terms, I would make sure an organization understands that they need to clean their data, clean it and document it.
Data
And I think
hygiene is a big one.
data hygiene, you know what I mean? And maybe, it's something that's, I think sometimes we focus so much on collecting data, we forget to clean it and to make sure it's actually usable. So, Jeff, you're saying something about how you meet a lot of clients and they have a wealth of data, but they lack insights, right? Let's clean that data. Let's make sure that one record doesn't represent 17 customers, right? Whatever the situation might be. Because then once you get that data cleaned and you get it documented, then I think you both said this, you can share it with your organization. Maybe department A doesn't need all the data, but I'm sure there's two or three attributes they could really use that'll help them do their jobs better. And I think in this digital world, We have to make sure that data is demystified across an entire organization because we put so much energy into acquiring this data, especially if it's zero or first party data. We want to make sure we can use it to the best of our ability. So, my number one advice, even though it's very broad, would be to clean it and document it. And as a 1B, I would say, well, actually, this might be the most important. Keep that data person happy or that data team, whoever it is. I had an opportunity to work with some really great data architects that went into systems, demystified everything, cleaned it up, established a data dictionary, right? So you can actually then define what each data point means for the entire organization. So I think, if you do everything that me, Jeff, and Kristen said, you're going to be pretty successful. And with that said, definitely appreciate you joining today. Jeff, I think you wanted to jump in with one thing.
Well, I was just going to say data dictionary was something else on my list. It wasn't
Yeah,
quite the number one
Mhm.
item, but yeah, you
yeah,
bring up a great point. If you can create that artifact so that you're all speaking the same language
Mhm.
across the organization, that's another big win that businesses can do, are capable of doing, but oftentimes forget to do.
totally agree. And we say, I think an old adage is communication is key. And sometimes we
Mhm.
forget that the most simple phrases and statements really do set the tone for what we need to be doing, whether it's in our personal lives with our families and relationships, but at a greater level, at an organizational level, communication through that data is going to be paramount to hitting those North Stars, hitting those goals, and making sure business is being done at the highest level possible. Any closing thoughts, Kristen and Jeff, before we get out of here?
Yeah, I think, I think our summary here is build a culture of data.